How do we welcome one another? How do we welcome those whose languages and cultures vary from ours? In this wonderful conversation with my guest, Ana Lucia Lico, we take a look at her own family experiences that were the basis for a research project that demonstrated the impulses towards both language learning and language loss that we experience in the United States and around the world. Listen to her stories, listen to her research, and discover for yourself the importance of welcoming everyone with the suitcase of their experiences into our own lives for sharing.
Welcome to Season 5, Episode 5 of It's About Language, with your host, Nora Lulich-Jones. Today's guest, Ana Lucia Lico, shares her inspiring journey of preserving language and culture while embracing a new life in a different country. Together, Nora and Ana explore how this loving support shaped Ana's family, her career as an educator, and her profound insights into the power of language and cultural identity. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, it's my pleasure to welcome my guest and friend, Ana Lucia Lico, here for this podcast. Welcome, Ana Lucia.
Thanks. What a great opportunity, honor to be here finally with my friend.
The honor is mine because you have created something that is just so dear to my heart and those that care about adolescence, care about learners of language. You have published a study and contributed to a book about the experience of adolescents in their heritage experience. So let's start with your background, what you have been doing professionally as well as personally here for these last several decades that set the stage for why you did the research as well as the content of the research as we'll talk about it.
Before I moved to the US, I was in the science field, but even for like 10 years before moving to the US, I already worked with people directly, with communication, with building bridges between what companies had to say and what people, how would we get those messages to, all levels of social class and education people would be able to understand. When I moved to the US, it was because, I dated, my husband is a North American. He's from the United States, and we met in Brazil. We dated distance relationship for 2 years, and then I moved, and our first son was born not long after I moved to the US. And when he was born, by the time he was like 3-4 days old, my husband had already read this book called How to Raise Bilingual Kids. And he said, Anna, you got to read this book. It's fabulous. And so it was early in our lives as a couple and then as a family. How would we really deal with the languages with the kids in our daily lives living in the US? Never occurred to me that I would not speak Portuguese to them, since Portuguese is my native language. So having the kids and me as a new mom in a country where I had no friends, no family, I knew, oh my God, I need a support network somehow. And I found pretty much out of chance, if that exists, a couple of other Brazilian families. Then we together founded this mothers group in the Virginia, DC, Maryland area, the DMV area, and a program like a cooperative teaching language and culture to our kids was born out of that mothers group. So we say that was the first child of that collective mothers group. And this baby, this educative initiative became ABRACE, which is the Brazilian Association for Culture and Education based in Virginia. So he was born in 2003. By 2004, we had the mothers group, and we started this language program, culture and language program, that back then we didn't even call heritage language yet. It was like not mother language or second language, whatever, additional language. And that's how my career as educator was born, because I started learning and studying a lot to help with this education program. The classes were at the parents' house, at the mother's house. So it was every week, very much the structure of what they call Sunday school or Saturday school, but it was at our house. We alternated every month. It was at a different, and we mothers were the teachers in a rotating basis. It was quite cool. Since then, since you asked, my career, since then, so ABRACE was born in 2005 with those programs, and I'm one of the founders, the mothers who founded ABRACE, and I remained engaged with ABRACE for many years. I was the executive director, and it was in my capacity as executive director that I got to meet Joy Payton. We started interacting like in 2012, 13, we finally meet, and that's how the conference that we run annually at American University was born, out of one conversation she and I were having at a Panera in Virginia when she still lived in Virginia. And from there to, the coalition was born, Coalition of Community-Based Heritage Languages Schools. So those two pieces of work, working with Brazilian communities in partnership with other associations in many countries, is like my Brazilian side. And then my contribution to the many other languages is through the coalition side, as if that exists.
That's that growth of engagement with more and more, growing the circle of people that are interested in that. Now, yours have how many children, and you have kept up with your Portuguese with them. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, I have two boys. I have two sons. One is now 21 and the other is 18. And I've watched through the years how easy it is for the teenage years bring for heritage language and culture. When they reach the teenage years, research shows, many studies show that the connection with their parents' native language and culture start going down pretty dramatically with the passing years. But when they reach teenage years, not only because of the pressure of a lot of reading and schoolwork from mainstream schools, but also peer pressure. And, if they don't interact with families and don't have friends in the native language and culture. So in 2020, I did a program with this institute from Portugal. They had months of classes that culminated with a short, small, research project. And that back then, that I did a research project about the teenage years and how, for those teenagers who did keep in touch with their heritage language and culture, what did they do using the language? Did they really connect with the culture? How? So we wanted to focus back then on the positives. We know about the negatives, but what did they? And that was the very inspiring. That was the seed for my research project when I did the master's program. Also, because I wanted to do a deep dive on how do they see their learning trajectory. How do they, when they get, teenage year, why teenage years also? Not only because they tend to be the orphans, they don't belong there, they don't belong here, especially if they were born in the native country and then moved to the US whenever later. And I wanted to get some information on their perception of their trajectory, learning trajectory, but also if they are connected to their inherited identity. What's the role of the language in that? And so for me, I I don't know how to be a mom in another language other than my native language. It's my heart language or language of my heart. And I've said that for many years. And every time I say that, people, especially Brazilians, they go like, oh, I never thought about it this way. Because to me, it was always is always so natural. Like we are visiting in-laws. We're at the table having dinner. I don't speak to my boys in a different language because they're my boys. They're, it's our connection. It's so us. It's precious. It's our little, I say it's our little, Brazilian seeding, whatever area. So yeah, I think, did I answer?
Yes, yes. And one of the things that I think is so powerful about the fact that you're combining your scientific background, your love of research, with the storytelling that captures the heart of people. That's a 1-2 punch for folks to be able to understand the role of heritage language, heritage identity in a very important group, namely folks exactly like your sons who have a background and who have had a parent that has dedicated herself just naturally to keeping them going as bilingual folks. So let's dive into that storytelling a little bit. You mentioned about how adolescents perceive their own journey, how they perceive their identity, and you mentioned a very important part there about the fact that they could consider themselves orphans, neither in one culture nor the other, and that's hard for an adolescent. So tell some of the stories, share some of the narrative that you got from speaking with your son, with that the research that you did, and some other stories that you may have to tell that illustrate what you have found.
So if I may say, if I may simplify to make it a little more objective, their narratives show that, and I get goosebumps by sharing that. In their words, if they see themselves as, for example, Brazilians, or if they identify with what being a Brazilian is, the Brazilian culture and stuff, it starts and is primarily nurtured by their strong connection to the parent who speaks that language, whether it's one or both. And so both in the two studies I did, the short one first, and then my master's research, which took a little over a year, their perception is, if my mother is from this country, is from Brazil, and she is, the way she talks, the food we cook, the way our interaction goes, all our lives in Portuguese, the process is so natural. The acquisition is so natural and is so profoundly meaningful that they don't see themselves. There is no sacrifice or effort, really. It's really natural. So the attitude of the parents, the parent who's the speaker of the minority language, say, is key throughout the whole process. So that's from their words, not my words. That's one side of it, if I may say side. And the other is, Nora is tremendously impacting the affective aspect of the learning, not only the cognitive. And by that, I mean my sons and several of the other teenagers I interviewed for my first, smaller study, they were for many years students attending a community-based heritage language school. Through those years, in their perception, the most important part is not the classes where they learned grammar. Are not the classes where they learned history. The most important part, and I get goosebumps again, is the friendships that they created, the fun times they had at recess, the amazing experiences they had, meaningful experiences they had in the native country. Not only so, when visiting family, the extended family, when meeting kids from my friends, friends of mine who have kids, and they do play times, when they had play times together, or they go to movies, or they do summer camps, and they do in the native country. So we tend to focus too much on the learning, the technical part of the learning per se, and we don't invest enough in nurturing this whole package. It's so beautiful. My study, my research is being published in English probably by January. Will be finished January, February, and I do want to share it because it has some very precious insights for parents and educators and related to what you just asked.
That's huge. And the goosebumps are not only on your part, but also on mine, that it's the belonging, once again, that makes all the difference. Language can be considered a head game, but that's a belonging moment that happens. When you take a look at, let's, for just a moment, kind of broaden this a bit. And I don't mean to take it off the heritage language approach, because that in itself is such an important context we could talk about for days. But there's an element here, the belonging part, the understanding of how adolescents, who now have more charge of their brains and their spirits and their decisions, begin to turn from, I'll learn this content because I'm in front of it, to I need a sense of belonging in order to commit. Have I said that correctly? Have I tapped on something here that has a larger picture, or includes, if I put it that way better, includes more learners of language along with heritage language learners?
First of all, I think the belonging aspect is so critical. It's critical to be achieved and to be valued and respected and to belong. For example, my kids never saw that they had to leave Portuguese aside in order to belong, for instance, to the American society, to their circle of friends in the mainstream school. They never saw they had to skip one or leave one behind. Also, because I know my family is privileged, that my husband is a U.S. native citizen, but he always supported and valued so much what I had to bring, what I brought. He used this metaphor many years ago. The kids were little, when he told a friend of ours. He said, when you marry somebody from a different country, you don't expect this adult moves to your country with an empty suitcase. You don't expect that they bring nothing of their history, of their pleasures, the music they listen to, the books they like, the literature pieces that made up who they are. And so having a partner who's completely, on your side. And so at home, we always had this Brazilian celebrations, American celebrations. For Brazilians, there isn't Thanksgiving. And like Halloween, we see Halloween nowadays in several Latino countries. Why? because they are copying some northern countries, but they were not mean. So to me, we need to do that. But so I learned as a Brazilian to get to know and respect the local. I mean the majority society here is culture and customs and things like that. But that was not at the expense of what I planted, or of what we valued, every year we went to Brazil, the kids brought so much back with them. They brought their suitcases full too. So belonging, whether in a classroom, whether in a K-12 mainstream kind of school classroom, whether in a heritage language classroom, whether in a play group or whatever, that is so important for their well-being, so they feel respected and valued.
I'm dazzled. And you have suggestions in your results, in the things that you share at conferences and in meetings of many kinds, to those in education, parents of adolescents or emerging adolescents, to encourage that return to a heritage language study or to continue in more in depth? What are some of the other stories that you have found? Because this rich experience of where you say your sons never felt like they had to leave their Brazilian identity behind in order to fit in, is that common? And where it is not the feeling of the adolescents, how do you speak to those that are working with them to address that?
I can't say it's common. I can't actually. I'm sad to say that I don't think it's even the predominant situation for many or most adolescents. The number one suggestion I give is to the mother or father or both who are the native, came to the US from their countries, that they themselves fight to remain proud of who they are, of their roots, and what everything they lived that brought them to where they are. We don't need, as adults, to empty our suitcases in order to live peacefully and integrate in the new society. And that's huge, because that's the main message you're giving your kids. If your native origin, if who you are is of minor value, or it values less than the majority society, and nobody should ever have to feel like that. That's number one. The number two is for parents to fight, even if a little bit, even if they work too much during the week, they don't have much time, but on weekends, try to create opportunities for the kids to interact, having fun, interact nicely with other adults and children in the language, in the heritage language. It doesn't need to be in a classroom. Even if there is no community association near me, or I can't pay private tutors or stuff, doesn't matter. Do a recipe together. Try to play games you used to play when you were young or had a certain age. Try to teach them, and invite the husband or invite the wife to play those games too. That's for the end. If possible, at all possible, try regular visits back to the country of their origin. That we cannot go every year. It doesn't matter. Go when you can. Go every 2 years. Go every 3 years. Send the kids alone if it's possible to stay with grandparents for a couple of weeks and stuff like that. On the educator side, I think it's very important that the educators understand what's happening at the family, in the households, because it's very easy to criticize. It's very easy not to welcome the different backgrounds. The educators have to be themselves welcoming, so those families feel they belong before their kids would be able to feel they belong to whatever, school, community, and classroom. That's one. And two, the educators need to plan activities and lesson plans and stuff with the teenagers' input. The teenagers want and need to have a protagonist role in the process. They can't just be sitting down, top down kind of. No, for many reasons. And once they actively participate, they feel their voices are heard, valued, respected, they engage more. Then you have them. And each of them will be different. Even if, for example, could be in a mainstream school or at a heritage language community-based school. They have different backgrounds. Even if you have a class of 10 kids from Brazilian families, they have different histories. They have different stories. One may be of a family who never goes to Brazil. The other goes to Brazil very often. One is both parents are from Brazil. So the teachers need to invest a pretty decent amount of time getting to know them, get to know their narratives, get to hear where they have been, what they've been doing.
What keeps courses from being able to do that? There seems to be, and you can correct me here, of course, if I'm wrong, there seems to be a drop-off of commitment. And the students, do they understand the opportunities that are available to them? Can they see, how can they be provided a vision so that they can share those kinds of hopes with educators? And it's hard, I think, to encourage up generationally, but to be the protagonists in understand why their investment of their energies might happen. It's probably putting too much on the young person to do that, but it's such a gift to be able to have multiple cultural and linguistic experiences to draw from as part of your identity.
I think they see throughout the process, they see that at their corresponding level. So when they're 10, if they're playing soccer outside in a field with a bunch of everyone, if there are two kids who speak to each other in Brazil, in Portuguese, and say something like, hey, go get that ball in Portuguese, somebody else will go, wow, you speak Portuguese from Brazil? Oh my gosh, I'm such a fan of Pelé, or I'm such a fan of whatever. So that itself is like, wow, hey, it's nice to be a Brazilian. That's a small little example. Nobody needed to tell them. That's one example. What I think, Nora, going back to the first part of your question, I think curriculums and schools directives are not yet considering or fully prepared to give teachers training and space for that welcoming, for that really being student-centered. Because it's easy to say student-centered, but what is student-centered? Oh, there are 2 Arabic students in my classroom and 2 Mexican students in my classroom. So I'm going to include here some texts to read about Arab cultures and texts to read about. Is that student-centered, honey? No, it's not. That's not. So it's way beyond that. So it's more work and it's more curriculum flexibility. But down the road, research, not opinions, research shows it works, and it works deeply. That down the road, it's more rewarding and satisfying for the educators and for the schools to see how their students succeed. And schools need to engage the families. They need to engage, reach out to the communities, reach out to where some events are doing. And in schools, mainstream schools can absolutely count with community-based schools as their partners to do that work, to organize events together. So the school doesn't have money, resources, time to prepare a cultural event in whatever language. The community school is already doing that. They're doing it for you. So that's one aspect. But I think it's not difficult to show teenagers of many, 14, 15, 16. It's not difficult to show them how powerful is their linguistic and cultural repertoire nowadays. More and more. And they can see. What I say, it's not difficult. It's not difficult for teachers or parents to gather data to show them and show proportionally to what their age can process or understand. You're not going to tell a 6-year-old, oh, this is going to be very important for your career. Excuse me? 20 years from a career? What is a career, Mom? I just want to play. I want a video game or whatever. So, I mean, you got to be really, adequate here. Approach it in a best, proper, whatever way. But it's not difficult for them for the educators and parents to gather information that will be music to their ears. You approach it. They are crazy for sports. Approach it through sports. Oh, they're crazy for technology. Get it through technology. Like, hey, did you know that these video game building companies are looking for people who speaks all kinds of languages to develop games for the whatever respective countries? And there you go. If the teenagers resist, if they don't see it, which is common, especially if they were raised in a household who felt, you don't need this whatever minority language. If you know English, you're ready for the world. And we know that's not true. Even many Americans are waking up to realize that.
It's interesting you brought in so heavily there that moment where the adult, indeed, again, is demonstrating the value or lack thereof. And you also mentioned about a partnership and the community-based heritage language schools, which you are a co-founder and board member. Providing those opportunities, like kicking the ball down the thing and it turns out that somebody is enjoying it too. From that to research information to partner activities so that an exhausted teacher doesn't have to try to think of something that they'd like to do, but they don't have time to do. All of this seems to be pulling together, my friend, a sense of how it is that there are opportunities around adolescents and educators and parents that can help to pull some of these themes together and to encourage everyone's attitude to say, we embrace this multilingual opportunity. Help us to understand where people find that, what the community-based heritage language schools are about, where these stories happen that change people's lives.
And the context of the community-based heritage language schools. Well, you summarized it so beautifully. I'm glad it's all recorded because I want to get that later. Very beautifully. Well, first, I'm sure there are ways to reach out to many different language communities, even if they are not organized or structured as a school per se. You find, even if it's just virtual, if there isn't one logistically, geographically very easy next to you, but you can find and organize a couple video calls and some interaction and stuff like that, and maybe a visit one time. We have the Coalition of Community-Based Heritage Language Schools. We have a website where we gather information. We have language representatives for many languages. We are about, like, if I'm not wrong, 40 plus languages that we have language representatives for. We have a survey that we publish often with data from schools that work with more than 50 languages. So that's a way that schools can find and then reach out to them. But nowadays could be Instagram groups, could be Facebook groups, could be websites. It's not very easy. If you go, oh, I need to find a Croatian speaking community next to whatever zip code, go there, boom. It's, it might take a couple minutes, and you can even have maybe parents volunteer, help you find those, hey, or even the students. Hey, honey, we want to say, Nora, you're a student of my classroom. Can you please help me find where the Croatian communities, where do your parents go to? Please help me out. So they will love that. Oh my gosh. That's one way. So community-based heritage language schools are those initiatives that gather families to meet regularly. Could be on a Friday night, Saturday morning, or Sunday morning. We normally say Sunday schools because it's the standard way of saying, but for example, many Brazilian schools, community-based schools, they work on Saturday mornings. Or it could even be a heritage language that rents a place and meets every Tuesday afternoon after school at a certain place. And those meetings or classes, they are geared toward teaching language and culture in many different ways. There isn't a standard way, even within a language. There isn't a standard way. What seems to be the most common aspect is everyone there, families, students, and teachers, educators, administrators, would like to somehow provide real life opportunities to the kids, in some schools, adults too, in the native language. And that is so precious. Could be special birthday celebrations, or it could be cultural festivities, or it could be how, like, for example, in Brazil, we have Carnival, in other South American countries too. So when it's Carnival period, what do we teach the kids about Carnival in the different regions of the country? How do they dress? What kinds of music they play? What are the types of dances that people do? So in the community-based school, there are few that are completely connected to the native countries, say, Department of Education, and they have a stronger academic component. But regardless, we all aim to provide real life opportunities for the kids and to nurture for kids and families the value of that language and culture.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much. Where are you headed with this? What are the next steps in what you want to do and share and help to move forward?
One thing is, I'm going to continue working for the sustainability of the Brazilian school and work more actively with the umbrella organization for Portuguese schools, and also help consolidate and expand the work of the coalition of community-based heritage language schools, because the coalition is doing a very impacting grassroots and work. There's quite a bit of room for us to reach more schools, reach more families, and do more with the ones we already have. I believe that the more unite, or the more collective is our focus, the stronger we get. There is an African proverb that really summarizes my view of life since forever, that it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. To me, and so I believe, for instance, we are with this umbrella organization that works in the US, we will be developing some kind of projects together with organizations in Europe, and then, to pilot some kind of more connection. I myself want to do more, join more and more programs that help support families to see that they don't need to empty their suitcases in order to integrate to the new society. We can't erase our histories in order to build somebody else's story in our personal portfolio. There isn't, you can't tell an adult, forget everything, 30, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, whatever the age. And so I want to write a book. And 2025 is my start. It's my new, I can't say it's my new year project because projects for New Year's normally tend to be left in the shelf. But yeah, I want to write a book to share more about our family's journey, but with summarizing a lot of my experience with heritage, language, and culture for families and educators.
Well, and that image that you have provided several times now that is so powerful, that you were blessed to have when you moved to the United States. You didn't have a spouse that expected you to empty your suitcase, understood it couldn't really be. And the important way that you bring back the fact that any culture that expects people to empty their suitcases on behalf of absorbing only the received country is not building a sustainable future for anyone. Right now, my dear friend, what I would love for you to do is have your two sons in front of your mind, in front of your image right now. And I'd love for you to just turn to them again here as we finish up and just say, my dear sons, this is what is on my heart for you, for your heritage, for all we've talked about today and more. What do you say to your sons as our parting time here?
It's a little challenging because I would not say in English, but I'll try to translate into English. Gabriel and Lucas, I'm so happy that the seed of the Brazilian identity was cultivated in your hearts and grew up to be strong, beautiful, big trees. That is your connection to the Brazilian identity that I see nowadays. And I see you're global citizens because of the Brazilian language and culture. This opened up your hearts to other language and cultures. You speak 3-4 languages now, and you're much more tolerant and respectful citizens of the world than I have ever been. So you help me be a better person every day.
Ana Lucia, is there anything else that you would like to make sure that you say to my audience before we end today? Something that you feel needs to be said again or that was not touched on that you just want to make sure that people hear?
There's one aspect, Nora, that I hear all the time. People say, oh, but it's so difficult. Oh, it takes time. Oh, it takes effort. Even for those who, you work all day in English, then you get home tired and you have to, whatever, cook dinner or do homework with the kids and stuff or supervise this or that. I think we absolutely have to fight, whether it's a little difficult, mildly difficult, or very difficult, or hard, or challenging. You have to fight to remain living the language and culture that are meaningful to you or to your students. So fight not to accommodate. Fight against supervisors' pressure. Fight against heavy, hectic deadlines. Fight against not enough resources. Fight against lack of support. And if you feel alone, parent or educator, Look for other schools, look for communities, look for organizations. You're going to find people like us ready to give you a hug and embrace the journey together.
Thank you, Ana Lucia. That was an encouragement that I certainly will continue to make with you for the future. The hardest part is not dreaming and bringing into reality the whole identity that we have across cultures around the globe. Thank you for everything that you have shared today.
Thank you. This has been very touching, very important to me. Thank you, Nora, for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this conversation with my guest, Ana Lucia Lico. Let us remember the story of how when we welcome those with language and cultures that grow our own knowledge of the world, that we bring a better world about.